Hello, this is Danny Ryan, and welcome to the ThreeWill podcast. This morning we've got two other people here in the room with me. We've got the usual Tommy Ryan here with me. Hey, Tommy.
Good morning, Danny.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Doing very well.
Very good. Glad to have you back. We want to say congratulations on your 25-year anniversary to Linda.
That's right.
Wedding anniversary. That's huge.
Coming straight from the mountains.
You had a good time?
Yeah. Good day of hiking and relaxing. And actually, the first time I probably read a hardback book in years.
Really?
So,
what'd you read?
Marcus Aurelius, which is a Stoic, back in 150 AD period. So, interesting person. I mean, basically, it's reflecting on his diary.
Okay.
And they're kind of dissecting that and trying to give you context to it. And it's really some deep thoughts.
Nice.
Really good reading for being up in the mountains.
Did someone recommend this to you, or how did you run into that book?
Linda's read it. And
Okay.
I've heard about it. I've heard other people reference it. So I've always been curious about reading it. So I cracked that open.
That lead to some good conversations with Linda, hopefully, too, since she's read it as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had some conversations around that. And actually, we're probably going to have a blog post coming out of conversation.
I like it. I like it even better.
We were talking about, after 25 years, what advice would we give to our children about a strong marriage. And so things that we think that we didn't really know when we got married, to say these are the things that we've learned over the past 25 years. So,
that's awesome. Can't wait to read that.
It'll be a joint blog post that we're going to do together.
And talking about your children, we have Austin Ryan here in the room with me. Austin is our new marketing intern. And I haven't had a marketing intern up to this point, so you're in a new ground here for me. But welcome to the ThreeWill team, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that sort of leads to today's conversation, which maybe before I jump into that conversation, let me see the socks.
Don't forget the socks.
Oh my goodness.
Yellow,
so folks,
orange, some stripes.
He has got
It's all
some, yes. Where did you get those from?
These, I think Banana Republic. Actually.
Nice. And I showed you earlier.
Go-to.
I showed you earlier. Yeah, you need to hand down some more socks. I have my one pair of cool socks, which is, and I want to start my MailChimp socks, representing MailChimp out of Atlanta, Georgia. And you said you saw them down at Ponce City Market?
Yeah. I didn't see their office, but
okay.
Alex was saying that's where their office is.
Very nice. And if anyone from MailChimp is listening, Alex Ryan would love an internship there.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll just work in that angle. So today's topic, we have Austin earlier this week, just to give you a little bit of background. Austin's been working on some of the SEO and sort of taking a look at our website, and he made the critical mistake of saying, why don't we have a Wikipedia page for ThreeWill? And so I said, that's nice. I don't know. Why don't we have a ThreeWill page for Wikipedia? And why don't you go ahead and go make that page for us, Austin? He's going to learn over the course of this summer to complain about nothing. Everything's going to be great. He's going to be like, Dan, you're just like a marketing genius. And he'll learn this over the course of the internship, that anything that he sees as a problem becomes his problem. And he can go after it. It's an opportunity. Absolutely. So what he was trying to do was to, it's more difficult than you would expect it to be, which is to put out factual information on Wikipedia, because everything on Wikipedia is factual. But you're trying your best to provide third-party references to facts that you have on Wikipedia. So that leads to this conversation, which is sort of what are the milestones? What do you see, Tommy, as being some of the milestones of ThreeWill? You know, the obvious one starting out with, founded in 2001. Maybe let's just talk through what things do you think Austin should have as milestones of the company?
Well, even to go back before the founding, I think the idea of ThreeWill I think came when you came to visit up in Maryland, and I think we started getting an idea of wouldn't it be interesting to have a business together when we were seeing the internet becoming a viable place for commerce and people to do business. And so that was, I think, a high interest of ours to kind of explore in that area. And we ended up going to a company together called, at the time, Omni Technologies. And we said, let's try working together to see if we're work compatible to start a business. So kind of having that test bed of, what's project work like together at a company doing business in the internet age. And that was kind of the beginning thoughts of ThreeWill, where even when I went in and interviewed with ThreeWill with Wayne Kellum, the president, I mentioned that our goal is to start a business together one day. And he said, that's great. I hope you never get to that point, because I'd love for you to stay here, but that's great. That's a great goal to have. And so we had that as a starting point of it, and we poured ourselves into that experience at Extreme Logic, what it was called after Omni Technologies. And we had several projects together. And then I think meeting at Starbucks and taking walks was how we formed kind of that company. I think it wasn't one of those things, let's start a company and the next day we quit our jobs. We ended up taking walks and saying, what's important about starting a company? Why would we want to do that?
We were highly caffeinated and had lots of oxygen in our system.
That's right.
We had lots of where great things start typically are on a good walk, going out and just letting your mind go free a little bit and talk about what do you want to create. That's where things are created.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know if there's not going to be milestones that you reference on Wikipedia, but I think that's kind of key and important for a company is, what's the origin of it? What's that reason? What's that purpose?
Yep.
And the thing, I know we don't say as much today, but I've actually been thinking about it recently, is this whole turning the art of software development into a science. I think we saw a lot of things that were a lot of mistakes and things that you could learn from and improve, and versus just going on to the next thing. And I think that's what it made SharePoint sticky with us, because we wanted to kind of hone and craft that and make it better and better. And the more time you spend with a technology, the more you can hone in on that and turn it more into a science. But I think at the end of the day, the work that we do is a balance of art and science. I don't think you can turn it totally into a science because of the people interaction, the high interpersonal skill that it takes to be a consultant and to help people that have problems and turn those into solutions.
Yeah, and I know this is great. I mean, this is a bit of talking about what the ThreeWill story is, sort of what's the background behind the company itself, which is great. And I think, part of the, I think we could do a whole separate podcast on where the whole concept of the ThreeWill name came from, which is people, process, technology, and really the combination of those three things, which is sort of, again, being highly caffeinated, thinking that was what we wanted to focus in on, a very specific technology, a very specific process that we're using, and then looking for people with a specific inside the culture with a specific set of values that we have out on our website that we thought that was the combination of those three things is what we were trying to start out with as a company. So absolutely. So founding the company, tell me what sort of what happened in 2001, a little bit more context on what, how did this whole thing go down?
Well, in 2001, when we started the company, we had a non-compete with Extreme Logic. So for that period of time, we could not do the consulting work. So in the Atlanta area, so we ended up doing training really all over the world. We signed up with some of the national training providers And since we wrote a book on ASP.NET and C Sharp, that was the up and coming hot thing that needed to be in the form of training to a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So that brought us all over the U.S. and brought us all over the world. I know we went together to do a Train the Trainer in Amsterdam, and you ended up doing kind of a world tour on, I think it was on Windows Server.
It was Windows Server and ASP.NET, whatever.
IIS
and
technologies.
Yep.
And you came back, and I think I gave you a shirt that showed you your world tour dates on the back.
Yeah.
So I think that first year was going around and evangelizing ASP.NET and web technology, which was an interesting period because we got into business together really to do the consulting. So that was a little bit of a holding pattern for us. That I think we see value in training. We've attempted to try to integrate some of that back into our business, but it's very hard. It's a different day and age when it comes to training. The people in a classroom and coming in as a trainer. Those are not common ways of learning technology. You see things like Pluralsight, and that's becoming more the mainstream way of doing that. But that was the first year, and then some of our first work, working with a neighbor, my next door neighbor, where we're building a website for them with them working in the home default loans that needed to have some assistance in getting people into a house that they could actually afford and save. They were called home savers, and they were trying to keep people in their houses by refinancing and finding ways to allow them to make it affordable. And then also another personal connection. This is one of the things you learn in business, that it is all about relationships. And one of our close relationships is with our brother Bobby at Apollo MD. And at Apollo MD, I think we did a really nice consulting work there initially. Learned a lot of lessons on how to present,
present
projects.
proposals.
We learned how to avoid sticker shock. I mean, I think we ran into a sticker shock problem there when we designed something very, probably appropriate, but we didn't lead them down the path to understand how we got there. But that work was with SharePoint. It wasn't intentional, but it happened to be our first kind of enterprise set of work.
It was Team Services. What was it? What it was called? What was it?
I think SharePoint Team Services.
Yeah.
And
STS.
I guess you would say it was SharePoint 2001. But it was kind of that free version, and allowed them to have a shared calendar, shared documents, and we created a scheduling calendar, and we did some customizations to it to allow them to schedule physicians.
This is great because I don't know if I shared this with you, but next week I'm going over to Kennesaw to do a presentation on family businesses, what it's like to run a family business. And this is giving me some really good pearls here, because I think some of this, what you're talking about, I'm sort of putting together in my mind a list of some of the things that we've learned. First one being work together first in sort of a low risk way, which is what we did with working at Extreme Logic. Second one would be have a plan B, which was our doing the training instead of consulting work. And third one, I'm thinking your relationships, how important they are for finding your initial business. How that's really in order for you to get a business up and running, your personal relationships can end up translating into the first set of work that you end up getting as a new business.
Right.
So keep going. You're giving me some great material here. So what's next? What's next from here?
Well, we ended up doing a lot of web-based development. Along the way, kind of a prominent figure in our ThreeWill background was Nick Kalivis, and so Nick Kalivis was someone that we were consulting with that worked at Extreme Logic. We met him in some project work that we had at Extreme Logic, and then for the company Ernst & Young. And at Ernst & Young, I think he valued our approach to how we helped that project. We kind of stuck through the project, through the roughest parts of the project, and formed a kind of a relationship that he was willing to help us set out details of our business plan and just inspecting, adapting along the way. And we eventually did some work at Ernst & Young. It might have been 3 years later. We'll have to go look at the actual date where our first project was there. But quite a bit of work at Ernst & Young. It was really our client that gave us the legs to start hiring other people.
That's another great point. You have to almost have an anchor client. You have to have someone who gets you from being the two founders or the however many founders to the point in which you can start to hire new people.
Right.
And you have to have, it's like it or not, it's for, at least for us, it was one client often is one where you're getting a lot of multiple work from, which allows for you to focus in on doing some internal improvements of hiring folks and building out the team.
Right. And so that was, I think, a critical milestone for us. And then Bell South was actually a critical milestone for us. I think that got us into the world of SharePoint. And that, working with SharePoint 2003 and building something that was going to be compatible to the next version of SharePoint 2007. So that was around the 2006 timeframe. So between Ernst & Young and Bell South, there was a numerous number of projects that we did. Did a lot of stuff helping Microsoft Consulting Services. Some of the training that we did, I think, led into a certain level of respect that we knew that space of ASP.NET, and did a variety of number of projects. Groove is one thing to note in between kind of SharePoint and starting with our first project at Ernst & Young. We did a couple large Groove projects, and those Groove projects kind of pointed to our passion for collaborative technology. There was something about the excitement of seeing when people work together in software, how that software lights up and starts encouraging behavior to do more together as a team, and this whole work together better concept, I think, kind of came out of that collaboration was the type of applications we gravitated to. We didn't know that from the beginning. I don't think we started the company thinking about work together better. I think we started the company saying, how can we kind of turn the art of software development into a science, trying to be very engineering mentality towards software, where software seemed a little bit loosey-goosey of you kind of just did whatever. And there was a little bit of structure around the language of software development, but the whole process side seemed like it needed a lot of improvement over time. And it's been a passion of ours as we evolved in our thought process around what is the appropriate methodology.
I think that as well, since your background is chemical engineering, mine's industrial engineering, that's had a big influence on this culture, which is focusing in on we're very problem-solving type of people.
Right.
We want to take on the big problems, and we want to be there for folks to present solutions. We're not real big into to just talking about things or making more problems, but we are really interested in how do we define. I think a part of our process is defining what we're going to do and how we're going to prove we actually do that. I think it's very core to who we are as a company and a part of our culture.
I remember, you just saying that, of kind of being consultative. One of the things that really connected with me and gave me job satisfaction in the area of software development was when we were doing the project for Yellow Truck. And I remember facing that challenge of not getting someone's attention to make a decision and coming up with alternatives and suggestions of what is the best path, but being open to the alternative paths.
Yeah.
And just remember, through email conversations and phone conversations where I was developing that skill, and it felt good to be able to help people get out of kind of that being stuck.
Yeah.
Where they feel overwhelmed with the problem in front of them. They don't know exactly what path to take. So being that person that's blazing the trail for them, taking into consideration what are they trying to accomplish, and then being brave enough to move forward with that problem and adapt to what you learn along the way. And I think that's why Agile was so important to us as we discovered Agile as a methodology, is that ability of you don't know everything, but be brave enough to take the next step as informed as you can be, and then adapt to what you learn along the way.
I think that's a good milestone for us. When did we, because you and I looked at different sort of what we were going to say our process is, instead of sort of baking our own thing up and saying, oh, this is the ThreeWill process. Do you remember?
It's very
when
close
was
to
that?
the time of
around
SharePoint. It's
Okay.
very close to that time, if not, within a year, I would say.
Yeah.
And we can go back, and I think I put something out on Yammer about the date that I went to the training with Pete, with Mike Cohn.
That's a Mike Cohn training, okay.
Mike Cohn training, because that's when we decided right before that we wanted to get some training to start rolling that out in the organization. So we were really big into RUP, and RUP just seemed to be too much education over all the components that go into the rational unified process. And as we looked at Agile looked like a lightweight, very practical way of doing it, iterative development.
And then we chose Scrum as like a type of Agile.
It's a type of Agile.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Back then there was XP. There was a number of extreme programming. Used
Thank you for defining the
acronyms. Did concepts like paired programming.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things came from that Agile movement. And there's a really good kind of summary of what Agile is with the Agile Manifesto that points about the value of, there are kind of two competing things, and what do you value more when those things compete against each other.
Now, we were starting to do a bunch of work with SharePoint, which we have traditionally either done for, we started doing it with enterprises, so building solutions that companies would use inside their organization. And then we started building some of these connectors. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when you get into SharePoint, one of the things that we did, which I'm amazed that we did this, because it was one of the things that is ideally we should do this, and you never get to that ideally we do this. But we went into SharePoint saying, what can you do out of the box? What can you get from the platform? So we were challenging people to put away Visual Studio for a period of time and understand the platform.
Yep.
So we did that, but we after a period of time we got into what were the edges of SharePoint, what were the technically challenging parts of SharePoint, and we have very strong app dev minded people here, and they were able to soften those edges with SharePoint and do that very well. And we had work with Groove, and we did a lot of the high-end technical pieces of extending Groove. And some people in that Groove organization went to Microsoft, and when that happened, there was a period of time that Microsoft was trying to say SharePoint is integrated with other platforms, and they were having a conversation with Confluence. It was, I think, Steve Ballmer with the president of Atlassian, and coming out of that, they were saying, when we go to this next conference, we want to show integration, I think with both NewsGator and Confluence. And so Deb Bannon got us connected and said, these folks at ThreeWill, I know they're in SharePoint, and we did work with them at Groove, and they're top-notch people. And so we had that opportunity to go in and build a connector for Atlassian for their Confluence Enterprise Wiki product. And that turned on I think, a high passion within our group. There was something about, we can do really high-end
Yep.
development in this form of integration, and be kind of proud about that, because it is that turning art into science. You're trying to package that.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you trying to build it and deploy it into one organization, you're trying to build it and package it so it can be deployed anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a kick out of figuring that out and making that happen. And that led into, I think we say a dozen
different
connectors.
And that includes connectors. I mean, we did, I think the big ones were like Jive, when we did Jive's connector and worked with them to integrate it with SharePoint. In more recent years, the work that we did with Salesforce and connecting up Chatter with SharePoint, it's amazing how that sort of, and I think it really did. We liked the high-end type of product development work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that sort of led to, I know within recent years, has led to us building some products of our own and just trying to say, okay, how do we build stuff out for the App Exchange? How do we build things out for the Office Store? And for us to have those capabilities, I don't think right now we're not doing a whole lot of product development work for other companies, but I could see that coming back.
Sure.
I really could.
Yeah, I think with this next wave of technology re-engineering that's going on within the Office platform, and some of the recent announcements on the SharePoint framework, I think that's going to lead to people needing some help to figure that out and do it right the first time.
Yep. So it sounds like we're over the course of the years, we're getting more focused in on a specific process that we're using. We're getting more focused in on a specific technologies that we're trying to hone in on. What's as a organization, what's the sort of how have we grown as an organization, not just number wise, but sort of as through the years, how do we grow to be who we are today?
Interesting. I think if you look at it, we've been able to let go of some things over time.
Yeah.
So, I traditionally have been involved in the delivery of, being hands-on, working on projects, leading projects, helping across projects.
Yep.
And, you were doing mostly the sales aspect of things, other kind of functions, and then we've kind of let go of some of the things that we've done in the past, and not perfect at this. We continue to strive to find ways to free up, to allow other people to fill those responsibilities. But Bruce coming on board and helping with being the VP of delivery, and making sure that that's going well. Pete with the director of technology to make sure we're headed in the right direction technology-wise. Everybody's trying to do that, but trying to have Pete spend a little bit of extra time and organize around that. And then the principles that we have in the organization where they're helping, in a sense, sell the things that we do. Not in a salesy sense, but more in a solution engineering sense, that we probably have depended more on you and myself to get in there and explain how we can do things and get it to a point of it's signed off as a project, and then delivery comes in. Delivery is starting a lot earlier in that conversation to allow us to talk to the problem as a solution versus just trying to sell a project.
Yeah, and I think over the course of the years, it's been more of I'm trying to focus more my efforts more on the marketing up front, identifying good clients and getting us in the door, and more recently focusing on things like workshops and it's just stuff that will help us to showcase what we're able to do on delivery, which you've said this so many times, our delivery sells.
Right.
And I say that in a very positive way. It's like once people can experience what goes on projects, they're like, I want more of this. And so for you and I, it's to get out of the way. It's to try to set it up so that very early on they're experiencing our delivery process. They're experiencing what it's like to have a problem and see it solved, see it worked through and solved by delivery.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What am I missing? I know we're sort of the latter years, and we probably could talk for another hour on this subject.
Sure.
But what were some of the other things that you think, maybe at a high level, milestone wise, that sort of, as you look at the history of the company? I know on a personal level, you had cancer about midway through this whole thing as well, and were out for a period of time.
Yeah, and that's close to the time of deciding on SharePoint, because I remember one of our bigger projects on SharePoint initially was with PowerServe or
PowerSecure.
PowerSecure.
Yeah.
And I remember coming back from treatment at that point and going to one of their sprint reviews. So a lot of things happened in that period of time. That was back in 2007 period of time. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of other milestones. I think there's plenty of, getting to a point of having multiple enterprise clients at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges in a small business is not to put your whole team on one project or one customer.
Yep.
And we've learned that lesson, where too much effort in one customer, it feels good when it's working well, and as soon as it takes a left turn, it can really hurt. So we put a lot of effort into making sure we're diversified. I think, some of the things that we've done around sustainment, which was maybe 3 years ago, or maybe closer to 4 to 5 years ago, with AT&T, that was a very key milestone for us to say we don't have to always be doing the new shiny. We can be there to support you over the lifetime of the solution, and that's where you're going to get the most value. It's exciting in that first period, but if you don't keep that application healthy, you're going to lose a lot of that ROI of that initial investment. So if you have the right amount of sustainment, you can really stretch out your dollars and get more bang for your buck if we're involved in that sustainment of the solution. And then most recently, migrations, where that can be looked at as something you're not creating anything new, and kind of doing that hard work of just moving it from one place to another place that usually lends itself to problems more than happy people. So that's an area that I think we can start honing in on, that science side of turning the art of software development into a science, because that migration piece of the things that we're doing, I think we've got some strong skills from a technology perspective to hone in and make that better and better and better each time. And I'm seeing it, and we're going to be amazed, 2 years down the road, of what we can accomplish from a migration standpoint for very complex migrations.
Awesome. Austin, anything that came up that I know this helps you out zero, because it's a lot of
it's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words, no references. And then the time when we won the #1 consulting company in the Southeast, according to Fortune Inc. We didn't have any of that for you. That would be too easy. The one thing that Austin, I have guaranteed that he's going to learn, he will take away. I got this from one of my Georgia Tech professors, Gus Baird, God rest his soul. He always would say, he passed away when I was taking his class, one of his computer science classes. But one of his many quotes was, "Ain't nothing easy when you're doing it for real." And he would always say, everybody thinks that when you're an outsider looking in, you're like, why don't you just create a wiki page? Okay, that's great. Well, let's go do that. And then you run into, there are real things that you have to figure out. And I know that's with starting a small company, it sounds like such an easy, it sounds easy from the outside, but when you get into it, there's a lot of real things that you have to, day-to-day decisions that have to be made that are really difficult decisions. And I know Tommy has you've done a great job with leading this company through the years. We're coming up on 15 years,
right?
Which is, I think, not very many companies are able to reach that point in time. I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is that we've kept the original feel of the culture. And this is probably another topic for another podcast, but just talking about the differences of I think some of the real decisions that we've made about staying small and keeping our culture because we wanted to create more of an environment than we're worried about growing to be a huge consulting company at all. I think we've made some tough decisions with that, and it's one of those things where you say we've reached 15 years. If I looked at when I started the company out, I had all these grand visions of we're going to be 100-person company and we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. But through the years, we've made some difficult decisions and are at a size where I'm proud where we're showing up to work every day. I think the people that we have here are really the type of folks who represent us well as a company. And I almost want to talk about that along with creating a lifestyle company as well. I think balance was something that on those long walks that we had at Starbucks and walking around is saying, can we really create an environment where we have a healthy personal life and a healthy professional life and keep balance in our marriages and with our families? And I think we've been able to do that over the course of these last 15 years, and it's been tough.
Yeah, I think I'd love to talk about that topic because it is, I think, the thing I think about the most is the culture and the whole thing of balance, that I want balance, not just for me, but I want balance for everyone at ThreeWill. And so, being able to celebrate 25 years of marriage, to me, that's accomplishment that, very focused in on as much as, the growth of ThreeWill is the growth of my relationship with, my spouse and my family. So that easier said than done. I think there are decisions that you have to make and decide what is success and what is fulfillment in your job. And I think as you get older, you get a better sense of what that is, and can kind of put things in perspective of what's important and what should you celebrate and what types of goals should you set.
Yeah, I think, and just sort of rounding this whole conversation out, there's a prideful part of me where I wish I could point Austin to Fortune.com, to all these sort of external sources which say we're a success. But in reality, it's a lot of how we've defined what our internal success is and what is it that we value around here that has made us what we, it's more than what the outside world says about us. It's more of have we created a company, a culture that we're proud of. And, you're not going to have the fortunes of the world writing about that, and that's okay. But it is something I think it's you have to let go of that and say, you know what, we're not the biggest company out there, but we've created something that we can all be proud of.
Yep.
So anything else before we wrap this up? I'm sorry, Austin, I wish I could have had some better third-party places you could go look for stuff, but you're getting to learn about ThreeWill at least, right?
Yep.
That's one thing. And so I'll have you join us on some of these other conversations that we have with other folks. I'm glad you're here. Why don't you pull up a little bit here, and so you've got Austin has just before we wrap this whole thing up, Austin has a tattoo on his arm that says Christianity is a relationship. Give me some background on that.
Well, I've always wanted a tattoo, and even though this is on my forearm where everyone can see, especially being here today with a polo on, it kind of feels a little different in a work environment, but it's something that means a lot to me, and I'm okay with other people seeing it and having conversations about it.
That's great. So it's something that when you're talking with other folks that it sort of sets up for you a conversation with them about your relationship with God.
Yep, that's one of the main things that I wanted from a tattoo. So having on the forum is the place I wanted it.
Awesome. Well, I am so glad that you're here with me. I think we're going to have a good time this summer, and look forward to more conversations, and you can sit here in the room with me as we do the other podcast, and thanks for joining me for this. Tommy, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was one of our longer conversations, but that's fine. Some of them can go kind of long, but I think it was great to hear from you about some of the milestones of the company, and I know we've got some good topics that we can do as follow-up topics to this as well, talking about where ThreeWill name came from. We mentioned sort of the creating more of a balanced cultures, talking about some of that. We're creating a lifestyle type of culture. So we got some good topics we can cover in the upcoming weeks, and look forward to having those conversations as well. Thank you everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.